Hey, everybody. It is Monday, May 12th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, happy belated Mother's Day again.
Thank you, Moshe. I had a very lovely Mother's Day. And if you were in the Northeast, I think the weather was absolutely perfect.
It's one of those perfect days, 76 and sunny, just enough wind. We spent the day, Alex, Olivia, and I at the Bronx Zoo, which was lovely. We ran into a couple Mo News fans, Jill. So that was great. I always say hi, everybody. The Mo News community everywhere, Jill Wagner.
I know. I was at a surprise party on Saturday night and ran into some Mo News fans there as well.
So appreciate all of you spreading the word, saying hello. Hope all of you had a wonderful Mother's Day as well. We're heading into that perfect part of the year, Jill. We do our regular check-ins on the Zodiac here on the Mo News Podcast. Taurus season's almost over, and the Gemini season is upon us. And you know what that means. My birthday and Jill's birthday.
Trouble. That's what it means.
Double trouble. Quadruple trouble as far as we're concerned.
Quadruple trouble. Moshe, let's get to some news. Lots of headlines this weekend.
Jill, it was a wild weekend. We have a lot to get to here, folks. If you checked out this weekend, good for you. And we're here to catch you up.
Didn't the world know it was Mother's Day and we just wanted to relax?
Well,
What
Jill,
happened?
Let me tell you something. Most of the world doesn't celebrate Mother's Day on this day. Mother's Day is actually celebrated in a variety of dates in a variety of places. But yeah, especially like Sunday. So many headlines to get to.
All right, huge economic news we're watching for today. The White House announced Sunday that a trade deal was reached with China, but details are still TBD. The question, will President Trump and Xi Jinping reduce tariffs?
A lot of questions today, but so far overnight, stocks are way up. Wall Street is finally feeling a little better for now.
Meanwhile, the president heads to the Middle East today on the first major international trip of his second term. Where he is going and where he's not going. It comes as Hamas says that it will be releasing the last living American hostage in Gaza, Edan Alexander, as a gesture of goodwill to Trump.
Yeah, a lot of developments in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Russia calls for direct peace talks with Ukraine. But is this Vladimir Putin trying to have it both ways?
Zelensky is getting on a plane right now, seeing if he needs to call his bluff.
And India and Pakistan agree to a ceasefire in Kashmir after the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio steps in. President Trump also set to receive the largest foreign gift ever to the United States, a plane from the Qataris, and it actually might serve as Air Force One. We'll look at the legal and ethical questions.
Yes, as the new Air Force One keeps getting delayed, Trump is looking at a plane that's been called fit for a king that the Qataris may deliver us. We're still trying to get our head around it.
And the new pope presides over his first Sunday Mass. What he said, and Chicago's obsession continues with their new hometown pope. They've even tracked him down and spotted him in pictures and videos at the 2005 White Sox World Series. And Moshe, it appears you've got a doppelganger, my friend.
We're going to discuss this. So many of you have messaged us saying, like, does Moshe look like the younger version of the Pope? We took a poll. We'll have the results.
By the way, I mentioned it to my husband. I'm like, people are thinking that the Pope and Moshe look alike. And he's like, oh my God, that was my first thought also.
There's the Chicago connection. Anyway, we'll discuss our similarities and our differences, Jill.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, on this day in history, the trial of the century, not the trial you're thinking of, and why it led to the kicking out of cameras in the courtroom.
So I'm thinking OJ. That's obviously not it.
The century was a long century, and earlier in the century, they thought they had the trial of the century. Some of you might know it.
Little did they know.
Little did they know that decades later, there would be yet another trial of the century. Sort of actually takes me back to the fact that, they tried to declare the best artist of the 21st century, right? Billboard did that recently. They're like, the best artist of the 21st century. I was like, guys, we have like 80 years to go in the 21st century. Like, how can we declare this?
It's a bold prediction.
It's a bold prediction. They did the same thing in the 20th century, but for trials. We'll break it down.
All right, the trade deal of the century. No, I'm just kidding. All right, the White House announcing a trade deal with China in a statement on Sunday after 2 days of negotiations in Geneva, Switzerland. But as of this recording, late Sunday night, both sides not disclosing any details of the deal. The weekend's talks were the first between top American and Chinese leaders since President Trump imposed 145% tariffs on Chinese imports. China responded with 125% tariffs on U.S. exports. The tariffs all but halted $600 billion in annual trade between the world's two biggest economies. The trade wars made a recession more likely and threatened to scramble the global economic order. Supply chain experts and retailers have said that the U.S. is just a few weeks away from empty shelves and soaring prices. Think the COVID pandemic, as trade has all but stopped. President Trump has dismissed those concerns, even saying last week that he believes it is a good thing that China's imports have collapsed. Despite concerns about port workers and truckers losing their jobs and Americans soon facing product shortages, heading into the weekend's talks, President Trump had signaled a willingness to drop U.S. tariffs on China to 80%, although that still would have been extremely high and prohibitive of most trade. Details, again, not yet out for this weekend's deal, and it is not clear if either country actually agreed to lower their tariffs or by how much.
Jill, they're promising a lot, though. I love this quote that I saw late on Sunday night from a Chinese official, the Vice Commerce Minister, Li Chenggang. He says, as we say back in China, if the dishes are delicious, the timing doesn't matter. As far as when they're going to announce details, what the details are, they say, listen, Jill, the dish is delicious.
And I feel like in America, we're like, we want it now.
Right. Like, I don't care how delicious it is. Like, I ordered it several hours ago.
I'm starving.
And I'm starving here. So that's what the Chinese are promising here. So the markets are responding really well. If you look at the overnight trade right now, as we are late Sunday into Monday, stock futures are up. Asian stocks are up. You know, the thing is, relations between the U.S. and China have hit such a low point that despite the fact that still today, we have a 145% tariff on China, they have a 125% tariff on us, just insane levels of tariffs. The promises in the positive talk, even without details, the promise of what they call substantial progress is providing a boost to sentiment here. That is how eager and desperate the markets and business have been for some good news between the U.S. and China. Keep in mind, these are the two largest economies in the world in a trade war. The U.S. has a nearly $300 billion trade deficit here. Trump has effectively applied here a version of shock therapy to the economic circumstances between the U.S. and China, effectively trying to overnight change 30 to 40 years of trajectory between the two countries. The thing is, since the 90s, China's become the workshop to the world. They were led into all these global trade organizations. And what China wants to do is basically export everything and import nothing. It wants to build everything and buy nothing from the rest of the world. And the U.S. is effectively fighting back on that, saying, yeah, it's meant a lot of cheap products for us, but ultimately it's killed our manufacturing. And you, China, manufacture a lot of things that have a lot of power over us, pharmaceuticals, steel, a variety of computer chips, a variety of things that like actually have national security elements to it. Now, there are a lot of arguments as to what Trump should have done or could have done here more incrementally, but he has applied the 145% tariffs. And this trade war has now led to these talks over the weekend in Switzerland. They weren't promising much, but they both come out of it. Again, the Chinese promising that the dish will be delicious. The Americans saying, we have a deal here. People will be very excited to hear the details. And it comes, as we've been telling you about, shortages coming to American shelves in the coming weeks. Everything from air conditioner parts to toys to apparel to batteries to battery products, all the things that we nearly entirely manufacture in China these days. And so these talks happened between Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, the U.S. Trade Representative, Jameson Greer, and top Chinese officials. They were very positive on Saturday. They were very positive on Sunday. And I think there's a realization, sort of like what we saw after the market collapsed in April, the White House needed to show results here. And so late last week, we had that announcement of the framework for a trade agreement with the UK. Again, that's not final either. China, it appears we're going to announce something, but it's unclear whether we signed anything. And again, what it even means to tariffs. Trump announced late last week he was going to lower the tariffs to 80%, as you mentioned. That wouldn't have done much. That's like from an insane number to an insane number as far as tariffs. There wasn't that much excitement about the UK because ultimately they account for about 3% of our trade. We bring in about 15% of our products from China, much more significant. In the offing here, White House officials say that they feel very positive about potential agreements very soon with India, with Israel, with Japan as well. And so remember, the White House trying to do basically 90 deals in 90 days. And sometimes one of these deals takes years to come together. So I think there's a lot of anticipation on Wall Street and in business on what exactly was agreed to here between the Chinese and the Americans. And Jill, to continue the metaphor, what will it taste like? Will it be fulfilling? Will we be hungry a couple hours later? Is it a snack? Is it an entree? Is it just dessert?
A light bite.
A light bite.
All right, President Trump also leaves today for his first major international trip of his second term. He'll be visiting Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. The trip will focus on a number of topics, including oil and trade, investment deals, the Israel-Hamas war, Yemen, and Iran's nuclear program. But the president's focus will be on securing business deals and new investments in the United States from the wealthy Gulf states to further the administration's America First agenda. This isn't about typical security issues. The swing through the deep-pocketed Middle Eastern monarchies is a marker of the president's priorities. It's also another sign of his intention to de-emphasize the traditional U.S. allies that typically serve as the first foreign destinations for new presidents. It also reflects his affection for the region, its wealth, and the pageantry that the host countries plan to roll out for him. The visit comes amid a sweep of pressing regional security concerns, including the fate of Gaza, Iran's nuclear program, and Trump's goal to broker a deal that would normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The trip is notable for the fact that Trump is not visiting Israel, which is seen as a bit of a snub to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The war between Israel and Gaza will loom large over the visit, although Saudi Arabia has said that it will not normalize relations with Israel unless there is a clear path to a two-state solution.
Jill, just to give you a reference for where presidents typically travel first, Biden's first trip was to England, Obama's first trip to Canada, George W. Bush, Mexico, Clinton, Canada, George H.W. Bush, Canada, Reagan, Canada, Ford, Mexico. You get my point as far as typically where presidents go for their first formal trip. In many cases, just across the border to our typical longstanding allies. For Biden, for Jimmy Carter, it was the UK, and I could go back further and further. Now, interestingly, Trump's first term, where was his first major foreign trip? Saudi Arabia. And here, while he did stop in Rome for the Pope's funeral, that wasn't considered sort of a major trip or like a very formal diplomatic trip, besides just attending the funeral there and popping in to see Zelensky for a few minutes. So in this case, his first big trip is a few days here in the Middle East. And he is enamored with the pomp of that royalty. It's literally his added gold fixtures to the Oval Office. And we will get into the gift that he allegedly is getting here from the Qatari government in the form of a plane later in the podcast. At the same time, we should note that he continues to really be engaged globally. We talked about in the headlines, we're talking on this podcast about how he's engaged with Russia and Ukraine, with India and Pakistan, with what's going on in Israel. But very much the Gulf is a central focus for not only his administration, but also privately, his company. Eric Trump, his son, recently visited Qatar in the UAE, presiding over deals on cryptocurrency, real estate for the Trump organization, the Trump family, the Trump business. Jared Kushner's gotten a couple $1 billion from the Middle East as well, coming out of his work in the first administration. Trump has already announced here that the Saudis are going to invest $11 billion into the U.S. economy. Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi Crown Prince, was the first foreign leader to call Trump after his inauguration. So a lot of connections here between Trump and these Middle Eastern rulers, and the fact that they are very transactional in the same way that Trump is, in terms of they ultimately are about the bottom line. There's not much focus on human rights and ethical and moral issues. It's very much about what is good for me right now as far as bottom line. So Trump likes to do business with those guys. And so he's going to be making this trip through there. You might remember the sword dance that was conducted in front of Trump during his first trip to Saudi Arabia. That image of him also with the kind of glow up globe with the Saudi ruler from the first term. So they tend to play into a lot of the pomp and circumstance that he likes as part of the job. And, frankly, they're all pivoting their economies right now away from oil, realizing that oil is certainly their thing and their asset, but they do need to be pivoting their economies. And ultimately, those Gulf countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular, see a threat from Iran. So they're trying to build their own military alliance and buying a lot of weapons and other items from the US. And so Trump has been looking at actually cutting a deal with the Saudis that would actually enable them to potentially build their own civilian nuclear program, which of course could lead to a military nuclear program as sort of a counterweight against the Iranians. Now, that's a deal that would have involved Israel, but there has been some struggle here between Israel and the Trump administration of late. Remember, Trump's done his own deal with the Houthis, despite the fact that they still send missiles to Israel. He, at times, has negotiated directly with Hamas, which we'll get to here in a second, despite the Israelis being like, wait, hold the phone. We don't think you should do that. And of course, his direct nuclear talks with the Iranians, while Iran's at their weak point. Again, the Israelis are like, that's not what we recommend here. And so Trump here is showing the Israelis some tough love while he still supports them a lot. Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel over the weekend, literally saying in an interview in Israeli media, Trump still loves you, Israel. Literally, that was his quote. Trump still loves you, because a lot of Israelis are concerned that they're like, well, he's doing this Middle East trip, notably not visiting Israel while he's in the neighborhood. But he's like, he still loves you, but he's got some other business to do here.
Right. You mentioned this big announcement on Sunday. Hamas announced that it agreed to release Edan Alexander. He is a dual U.S. and Israeli citizen, believed to be the last living American citizen who is still being held captive in Gaza. And this is weeks after Hamas had said it lost contact with the group that's allegedly been holding him hostage. Alexander's release is part of, quote, the steps being taken to achieve a ceasefire, open the crossings, and allow aid. This is according to the head of Hamas's negotiating team. Hamas not providing information on Edan Alexander's condition. Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, confirmed the agreement, saying that the release is likely taking place as soon as today.
So this is notable in that right now there's still 59 hostages remaining in Gaza. 21 of them, at least 21, are still believed to be alive. That includes Edan Alexander, and he's the last living American there. They also have the remains of several American hostages who have been held and either were killed on October 7th or afterwards. And Hamas is holding them, hoping to be able to return those remains for living prisoners in Israel. An Arab official telling the Times of Israel that Hamas is pushing for the release here as a gesture of goodwill to Trump, given that he's going to be in the region. Trump has told the Israeli government, do what you need to do, bomb what you need to bomb to get the hostages back. And so Hamas is trying to say, hey, we can still do business here, even though they've rejected several of the recent ceasefire offers. Remember, we told you last week, the Israelis have said they have a plan now to take complete control of Gaza again, reoccupy the entirety of the Strip to try to apply pressure to Hamas. Trump isn't loving that entire plan, but ultimately has effectively told the Israelis, go ahead and do what you need to do. Hamas trying to earn some goodwill here by releasing Alexander.
Moshe, I just quickly want to mention, as for timing, there's thinking that Hamas may release him around noon local time, which would be about 5 a.m. Eastern time. So it is possible that by the time you're listening to this podcast, that Edan Alexander will have been released.
Yeah, watch for those developments over on our Instagram page. In the meantime, a little background on him. He's originally from Tenafly, New Jersey. He moved to Israel at 18 to volunteer for the Israeli military, lived with his grandparents and other folks in Israel. He was kidnapped the morning of October 7th, and he had opted not to go home that weekend, stay on the military base. And that was one of the military bases that was overrun by Hamas. Again, he's one of the 21 hostages that are believed to still be alive there of the overall 59. And the move here is, I guess, Hamas hoping that they're showing that they can still be dealt with. The stumbling block that we're facing here is that as far as Israel's concerned, Hamas needs to go. They cannot rule Gaza anymore. And Hamas saying, no, we're not ending the war unless we have a deal that we get to continue to run this place.
All right, time for the speed read from Reuters. Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed direct peace talks aimed at ending the war with Ukraine to start later this month. Putin suggesting the talks could be held in Istanbul and would be held without preconditions aimed at creating a durable peace. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said in a statement on X that it was, quote, A positive sign that the Russians have finally begun to consider ending the war. But he says, quote, the very first step in truly ending any war is a ceasefire. Zelensky said Sunday he'll travel to Turkey later this week to meet Putin to talk about a necessary basis for diplomacy to end the war. President Trump took to Truth Social to declare it, quote, a potentially great day for Russia and Ukraine, and promised a big week upcoming.
Huge, Jill. It's going to be a huge week in the world as he travels through the Middle East. Just a lot of developments. So we told you about what's happening between China and the U.S. on the trade front. This was a second major international headline over the weekend, that Putin gives this announcement on Saturday night. Obviously, we're skeptical, as everyone is, because it's Vladimir Putin, and he says a lot of things. But he's like, listen, I'm ready for talks, no preconditions. This would be huge if this meeting happens this week between Zelensky and Putin. They have not met since about 3.5 years ago when Russia first invaded Ukraine. The war has now led to hundreds of thousands of dead, hundreds of billions of dollars in destruction. Russia occupying an area the size of Pennsylvania now inside of Ukraine, 10 million plus Ukrainian refugees, just a lot that's developed here, right? And so the ceasefire is a real sticking point. Putin's proposal initially, even the U.S. was like, which has been relatively friendly here in the Trump administration to Putin, was like, you're asking for way too much here. Like, you're asking for not only the land that you occupy, you're asking for even more land and all these preconditions, including that Ukraine can't rearm itself, even though they're threatened by you on your border. And so Putin hit a reset button here, especially since Trump has said in recent weeks that Putin's asking for too much. It might be time to sanction Russia more. And so Trump has lost it with Putin lately. So Putin, realizing all of this, gives this announcement on Saturday. Zelensky, looking to potentially call his bluff, says, you know what, I'll fly to Turkey. Let's meet this week. So it will be interesting to see how that all breaks down. Turkey, just for background here, serves as sort of an intermediary because Turkey is in NATO, but is also friendly to Russia. And Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, sees himself as a peace broker here. And so it has actually been the location for previous talks. And Jill, if this happens, very significant news this week on the Russia-Ukraine front.
Also pretty significant from CNN, India and Pakistan agreed to a truce Saturday after U.S. mediated talks designed to defuse the most serious military confrontation between the two nuclear-armed countries in decades. Although the ceasefire was a bit shaky this weekend, just hours after a potential deal reached, there was some fighting in Kashmir with people on both sides reporting heavy exchanges of gunfire between Indian and Pakistani troops. Leaders from both countries accused the other of violating the deal. The fighting did quiet down by Sunday morning. Top military officials from both sides are expected to speak today. The violence between the neighbors, both with nuclear weapons, started after about 24 Indian Hindu tourists in Kashmir were attacked and killed by gunmen, part of an Islamic terror group. India blamed the attack on Pakistan, which denied any involvement, despite supporting terror groups aligned with its goals of taking back Kashmir in the past.
All right, so we talk China, U.S. We talk Russia, Ukraine. This story is India, Pakistan. Another thing that people were very worried about, Jill, as things escalated Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I remember waking up on Saturday morning. Remember, it was like a day and a half ago. And people were like, Moshe, I think the full-scale war is happening now between India and Pakistan. And then just hours later, Trump puts on Truth Social, we've struck a ceasefire, because things got pretty worrisome Friday as Pakistan was very aggressively counterattacking, and folks were worried that these two militaries, two of the largest in the world, Jill, with some of the most advanced weaponry in the world, including both have 100 plus nuclear weapons. People were like, this could escalate very quickly. And so ultimately, we haven't seen fighting like this between these two countries in more than 30 years since the 90s, bombing and shelling each other, dozens killed in the fighting. And so this was very closely watched. Marco Rubio apparently was very involved here in the negotiations. The Pakistanis give Rubio a lot of credit in the ceasefire. The Indians, not so much. It's very interesting kind of seeing how the breakdown is. And, you know, one question we got on Premium over the weekend, on the Mo News Premium page where we were following all weekend news coverage on Instagram, was like, wait, so who's fighting who here? Who's the alliances? Who are sort of like funding and arming? And one thing to keep in mind is the majority of the weapons and support for Pakistan comes from China. The majority of the weapons for the Indians come from Russia. So it's an interesting situation where typically the Russians and Chinese are aligned, but in this case, they're funding two sides of the war. But then there's U.S. weaponry, Israeli weaponry, French weaponry, all involved here, all very advanced military weapons being used there, and all over this region of Kashmir, which, as a reference point for Americans, is about the size of Minnesota. It's like, it looks like Switzerland. It's the size of Minnesota, has been a disputed area here for 80 years. They fought multiple wars over it, and it appears for now like it has calmed down, we think.
All right, so a lot of developments, Moshe. I mean, a lot going on this weekend in a good way.
Right. Like India and Pakistan appear farther from war. Russia and Ukraine appear like we could be closer to a ceasefire. I mean, it's going to be a while, right? And U.S. and China trade war seems to be calming. So in general here, while some of these topics are scary, we're talking about war and conflict, ultimately, this is one of these weekends where, like, we're closer. Well, actually, we'll talk about what the Pope's message was this weekend, but we're closer to the Pope's message about, like, can we get closer to peace, folks, than war? As the needle moves, like, we slightly move the needle closer to peace than war, at least on those fronts.
And potentially the last American hostage coming home, or the last living American hostage.
Yeah, and one more piece of good news there.
All right, from Politico, the Department of Homeland Security says arresting 3 Democratic members of Congress is, quote, on the table after the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, was arrested at an immigrant detention center. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, who is also a Democratic candidate to be the governor of New Jersey, was the only prominent arrest Friday by federal agents. He is accused of trespassing and ignoring warnings to leave a new Trump administration Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facility in Newark. DHS said in a statement that Baraka and several other Democratic members of Congress had joined protests outside the center and that they, quote, stormed the gate and broke into the detention facility. Mayor Baraka and the other Democrats at the scene have disputed this account. The mayor says he was there to hold a press conference and believes that he was targeted by federal officials. Baraka has alleged that the detention facility does not have the proper city permits to operate. The mayor facing trespassing charges. He's expected to appear in court, but he has been released from custody. The other New Jersey Democrats on the scene say that they didn't ask for permission to enter the facility because they believe they were exercising their oversight capabilities.
Yeah, important context here. Members of Congress believe they are legally allowed to make unannounced visits to ICE detention centers whenever they want. That ultimately that's part of being part of Congress, that they can conduct oversight over things the executive branch is doing. So, Jill, we posted this video late Friday from the scene. It was chaos outside this ICE facility. You have federal officials being like, no, these guys were trespassing. They were causing chaos here. And so the case of Baraka, at least, they arrested him, and they continue to threaten that they will arrest the other members of Congress. Now, remember, the mayor is a local official. Members of Congress are federal officials working for Congress. So I'm not sure whether DHS wants to go there or not. But by the way, there's a long history of members of Congress being arrested as part of protests. We have seen that in the past, or at least not arrested, but detained. And so, you're going to hear a lot of back and forth here, a lot of accusations over what happened, how much Congress believes they have authority over, how much the feds believe they have authority over. This is another one of those issues related to immigration where there is a dispute between two branches of government over authority. DHS, though, for their part, is alleging that one of the members of Congress, quote, body slammed an ICE officer. There is some video of this chaotic scene unfolding, but we don't see evidence, at least the video that we've seen here at Mo News, of any body slamming by a member of Congress that DHS claims was happening. DHS says they will release the body slamming video soon. We'll see what they mean by body slamming. I feel like I'm talking about WWE
just like
here.
Saying body slamming.
Yeah, I'm just like. We'll see how one defines body slamming.
Like the more you say it, I'm just picturing Saturday morning wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. It's like WWE or like Ultimate Fighting. Like that feels like everything's Ultimate Fighting these days, right? Joe Rogan is the top podcaster. Dana White is like friends with the president. Trump is attending Ultimate Fighting. There's allegations by DHS that members of Congress are body slamming people. Anyway, needless to say, Democrats are taking this very seriously. They believe that ICE has gone too far. The executive branch has gone too far. Interestingly, there was a court case on Friday related to one of the college students picked up by the federal government as they've been arresting folks who they believe are going against U.S. foreign policy, claiming there was visa violations that need to be deported. One of them was this woman out of Tufts University, Ozturk. Apparently, the only allegation against her is that she wrote or co-authored an op-ed piece in the a college newspaper at Tufts University, arguing against the university policy related to Israel. And she was an advocate for divestment from Israel. She didn't attend any protests, etc. The government arrested her in this video where like 7 ICE agents surrounded her in March. She's been in custody since then. A judge ruling on Friday that they can continue to pursue visa violations against her, but they got to let her out of jail. She does not pose a threat. He's like, what do you have against her? And they're like, oh, she wrote this op-ed piece. So he is letting her now fight that from home. And we have seen a number of cases here where judges have said the government's gone too far with some of these arrests. And in some cases, the government has actually pulled back on some of the allegations they've had against some of these students, some where they feel that they're totally in the right, some not so much. And all of them are going through the courts right now.
All right, a story we mentioned earlier in the podcast, this from ABC News. When President Trump is in Qatar on his Middle East trip this week, he is expected to be gifted a luxury Boeing jumbo jet by the country's royal family, which is possibly the biggest foreign gift ever received by the U.S. government. Sources familiar with the proposed arrangement tell ABC News that President Trump will use the plane as the new Air Force One while he is in office. And then after he is in office, ownership of the plane will be transferred to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The plane will initially be transferred to the U.S. Air Force, which will modify the plane to meet the specifications for any aircraft used to transport the president. The plane is so opulent that it is known as, quote, a flying palace. And it is estimated to be worth about $400 million. Trump is said to have toured the plane in February when it was parked at the West Palm Beach International Airport.
So to call this unusual would be kind. Jill, we've never seen anything at this scale. A $400 million plane gifted to the U.S. and then control will then go personally to Trump after his time as president. Many of you sent a message over the weekend over on the premium page. We had a discussion about the emoluments clause. So the Constitution has a foreign emoluments clause, and effectively emoluments is a fancy word for foreign payments or foreign gifts. And so there's a ban in the Constitution on foreign payments to a U.S. sitting president because, ethical concerns about that. Now, ultimately, it appears that the administration anticipated this. And so they ran this through the Justice Department. And despite raising questions here, the U.S. Justice Department, at least Trump's Justice Department, has ruled that they believe this is legal. It is legal for the Pentagon to accept this aircraft as a gift and then later turn it over to the Trump Library. They believe it does not violate laws against bribery or the prohibition against accepting gifts from a king, prince, or foreign head of state. The top White House lawyer has chimed in here, according to CNN, saying that it would be legally permissible for the donation of the aircraft to be conditioned on transferring its ownership to Trump's library for the end of his term. Now, the background here is the current Air Force One being used by Trump goes back to the early 90s. It is overdue for an upgrade. In fact, Trump allocated $4 billion for the new Air Force One back during his first term. But it has run into a whole bunch of delays, partially because the U.S. government, the Pentagon, keeps changing stuff that they want in the plane. And so you can't blame Boeing completely on this. Boeing is dealing with the upgrade of Air Force One, the new Air Force One. And so initially it was supposed to be ready by now. Then it was going to be 2027. Now it's going to be 2029. 2029 is significant because Trump, that's when his term is up. So he very much doesn't like the current Air Force One. In some ways, he sees it as a downgrade from his personal plane. And so I guess he struck this deal with the Qataris. Jill, this has a lot of people asking questions about legality. Some questions I got over the weekend was like, how would Republicans react if Biden got a plane from the Qataris and made it Air Force One? I'm like, yeah, they would probably be like losing it. And so in this case, not surprisingly, Democrats are losing it. Republicans are like, no, this is totally fine that Trump gets a plane from the Qatari government. So, you sort of see this game being played. But ultimately, I think there are both Republicans and Democrats are like, eek. I don't know if I agree with this. Now, I should say Trump chimed in on Sunday night, and he's like, listen, this is the True Social post. If you're ready, I quote Trump here. The fact that the Defense Department is getting a gift, all caps, free of charge, all caps, of a 747 aircraft to replace the 40-year-old Air Force One temporarily is a very public and transparent transaction. So bothers the crooked Democrats that they insist we pay top dollar for the plane. Anybody can do that. The Dems are world-class losers. MAGA. That's Trump's response, everybody.
The first thing that stuck out at me when you read that Truth Social post is the expression that we always use about social media companies that are free. And the quote is, if a product is free, then you are the product.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me think, is the president the product here? Or is the U.S. government, the U.S. taxpayers, the product here?
Well, according to Trump, that would make you a world-class loser, Jill, to even question that. I just saying, that's like literally his tweet, right? I think his argument is, listen, he's obsessed with the plane. Like, he literally right now, if you look at whenever we post clips from the Oval Office, Trump actually has a model of the new Air Force One sitting on a table, like that table with where the couch area is by the fireplace. The plane is always sitting there now. Like, Trump wants to show everyone. He's got an original copy of the Declaration of Independence. He's got a photo of the Gulf of Mexico, now Gulf of America. He's got that map sitting behind him all the time. And the other thing that is like on permanent display in the Oval Office right now is the new Air Force One. This is something actually in the first term when I was at CBS News, we interviewed him at his golf resort in Scotland. And this is back in 2018. And he kept talking to us like off camera and then on camera about the new Air Force One. Like, this is a big thing for him. He's been very excited about it. And the fact that like he still has to fly on this 90s era jet annoys him to no end. And I think the thing about the Qatari plane is it's already outfitted. It's been like customized for the royalty there. He likes gold. He likes those furnishings. And so he has struck this deal here. But this is one of those things where this is going to receive a lot of scrutiny, Jill.
He wants it. He doesn't care. He wants
it. He doesn't care. And the Justice Department, at least his Justice Department's like, yep, totally legal, totally kosher here. So we'll see how this unfolds.
And finally, from USA Today, Pope Leo XIV returned to the balcony where he was presented to the world as the new leader of the Roman Catholic Church just days ago, using his first Sunday address to the faithful to call for peace. He declared never again war to the roar of tens of thousands of people who had gathered in St. Peter's Square at around noon. Leo's appeal was addressed to the world's most powerful leaders. He noted that it had been almost 80 years to the day since the, quote, immense tragedy of World War II had ended. He quoted Pope Francis, who often referred to the current global wave of violence as a third world war in pieces. Leo was elected Pope on Thursday, becoming the first American pontiff. Since then, he has had a busy calendar with Vatican observers watching closely for clues on how he plans to lead. On Friday, he celebrated his first Mass in the Sistine Chapel as Pope. In his homily, he pledged to align himself with ordinary people, not with the rich.
Yes, this is very much in line with Francis. And Jill, interestingly, I can't get enough of these interviews, and neither can you guys based on our Instagram feed, with his two older brothers. So, a reminder, Pope Leo, formerly Robert Prevost, has two older brothers, John and Louis. He's the youngest of three brothers from Chicago. John was a Catholic school principal in Chicago. Louis was in the military, now retired in Florida. And both have been doing like tons of interviews over the weekend. When asked how he would rule his relationship with Francis, they both said, he's going to be pretty similar to Francis here. Whether they're speaking out of turn or not is unclear, but it does appear, at least based on this first week, that
like definitely speaking out of turn, right?
Well, at the same time, like Pope has been calling his brothers, like they're very close, these three. In fact, John at home was like talking about the phone calls plural, that he's had with his brother since he was elected Pope. And that was just like in the first 48 hours. So very close to his bros. And so I presume they're speaking in line with what their brother wanted. I don't know if their brother has had time to watch all of the interviews his brothers have done, because like they've been everywhere. Like I turn on my Instagram feed and like, oh, the brother did another interview. He's done News Nation. He's done CNN. He's done Fox News. Like they're all over the place, these guys. Anyway, needless to say, it does very much normalize the Pope in a way that I don't think we Americans, especially, the Pope is always this regal figure, etc. It's like this guy from Chicago goes to White Sox games. Jill, what came out over the weekend too, someone apparently watched the entire 2005 World Series games because 2005, the Chicago White Sox were in the World Series, and Prevost, Pope Leo XIV now, was at the World Series. So they were looking to see whether in those random cutaways of fans in the stands, could we get a picture of the Pope? And it turns out that in one of the games, they have, in fact, spotted the Pope. We posted the footage over the weekend. The Pope was at the game. I mean, he was pre-Pope, right? It was 20 years ago. But he was in the audience, like nervous in the ninth inning, like the rest of us. I don't know whether his connection to God might have helped the White Sox more than other folks who were praying in the stands at that time. But ultimately, that was notable as my fellow Chicagoans look for connections to this Pope. Notably, over the weekend, Jill, he didn't do it on Thursday in his first address. But over the weekend, he did deliver his homily in half in English, half in Italian. And so that was interesting. He's trying to downplay at times his Americanism, but I think English is his native language, along with several other languages he speaks. So he has made a point of at times addressing things in English. And he said in that homily, listen to the word of God, then listen to others, know how to build bridges, know how to listen in order not to judge, not to close doors, thinking that we have all the truth and no one can tell us anything. Interesting talking about not judging, building bridges. It'll be very interesting, Jill, given that we know this Pope is critical at times of the Trump administration, what he chooses to say in English and what he chooses to say in Italian. English, knowing that what he says in English will get replayed probably much more significantly here in the U.S. and at times when he's trying to hit the U.S. audience.
So, Moshe, in addition to monitoring the Sunday talk shows, we are now going to be monitoring Sunday Mass.
Right. We've always there's always a headline coming out of the Pope every Sunday. But now in America, I think when he says stuff in English, I think he'll probably get more coverage here than the previous popes. He's going to be talking to his fellow U.S. citizens, which, by the way, Joe, we got a question about that over the weekend. Yes, the Pope remains a U.S. citizen despite now being a foreign head of state running the Vatican. And yes, he technically has to file tax returns every year because we're one of a few countries that require American citizens, even if you live abroad for ever, to still file taxes here.
Sorry, Leo.
His brother's got to keep his CPA going here in the U.S.
And Moshe, as a proud member of the Mo News team, I think my biggest headline out of all of the Pope news is just that he really looks like you. You guys resemble each other. It's very odd.
Jill, we did a poll over the weekend. I got this too, and I didn't even think of it. And people are looking at younger photos of him. He has a darker complexion. His background's interesting, actually, because born in Chicago, but his maternal grandparents were mulatto or just self-described mulatto, including his grandfather came from Haiti. And so he is mixed race. I am, of course, North African, Moroccan on my father's side. My mother's side comes from Germany and Poland. So I think between Chicago and the fact that we have kind of darker, ethnically ambiguous facial faces, I guess, sure. Though I did do a poll. We did do a poll saying, are Moshe and the Pope twins, second cousins, or no resemblance? Second cousins won out. 70% of you said, yeah, you could be cousins. But there were a number of you, just under 10%, who were like, no, you guys are totally twins. So are you in the twins camp or the second cousins camp, Joe?
I'd go with probably first cousins.
First cousins. Okay, I should have added that as an option.
But there is a major resemblance. There's something about your faces that are just so similar.
I will tell you this, Jill. One thing that we don't share in common, baseball teams. I am, in fact, a Cubs fan. You can take that to the bank. He is a White Sox fan, and so we are split when it comes to Chicago baseball.
Or your religion. That's another thing.
Oh, yeah, there's also a religion.
That's where I thought you were going to go.
I'm a Jewish Cubs fan. He's a Catholic White Sox fan. Otherwise, same seas. Totally.
Exactly.
Otherwise, totally same.
The one thing we like different ice cream. I didn't know.
I went to the media. He wanted to go become a bishop and a cardinal. All right, we go to On This Day in History. On this day in 1896, New York City passes the first anti-spitting law in the country. Yes, this was once a thing in New York City. Now, there's no evidence that anyone follows the anti-spitting law. I don't even know if it's still into effect. But it came out of tuberculosis and the epidemic back then. So New York passed a law saying we will give you fines or jail time if you spit on the street. They made several thousand arrests. There were protests, naturally. There were anti-spitting signs. And so, Jill, if you were upset about COVID-era mask laws, I'll take you back to New York in the early teens when there was an anti-spitting law. Though I will say this, Jill, no one should be spitting on the street. Come on.
I mean, it's just sort of manners. I don't know if you necessarily need a law at this point, but maybe we do.
Well, there's a lot of ways we can clean up New York. Maybe we don't begin with spitting, to be honest with you, based on what I've seen in the city lately. Moving on this day in 1932, the trial of the century would unfold soon after the following developments. You might be familiar with Charles Lindbergh, the man who crossed the Atlantic. He was a celebrity in the U.S. And then there was a tragedy that befell his child. On this day in history, the 1-year-old Lindbergh baby that was kidnapped, this was a international story from their home in New Jersey, was found 2 months later, unfortunately and tragically dead on this day in history. This was a story that captivated the country. Lindbergh and his wife discover a ransom note in their home, in their child's empty room. It would be a couple months until they would unfortunately discover the remains of their child. It would take 2.5 more years before they find the kidnapper and the killer, arrest him, and that's when they would put him on trial. And so the kidnapping happens in 1932, discovery of the body on this day in history. By 1935, they finally put the kidnapper on trial, and it is dubbed the trial of the century back then in 1935. And at the time, it's one of the first prominent federal trials that has cameras in the courtroom for the newsreels that play before the movies at the time, as well as radio. It captures the nation's attention. The judge in the court finds it a major distraction and bans cameras in the courtroom. And that is why, to this day, cameras are not allowed in federal courtrooms, because dating back to then and the change of law, federal courts found that it was going to change the nature of the trial to let cameras into the courtroom. So to today, a number of states allow cameras in the courtroom, but on the federal level, we do not have cameras in the courtroom. And you can draw that direct line to the trial of the century from 1935, the Lindbergh trial. All right, to some lighter items here as we end. On this day in 1965, the Rolling Stones finished their studio recording of I Can't Get No Do-do-do. Satisfaction. Jill, Keith Richards didn't even realize he wrote this song. So the backstory here is that apparently he was sleeping one night. He wakes up in the middle of the bed. He kept a tape recorder next to his bed because, songwriters sometimes get ideas. So apparently he grabbed a tape recorder, laid down the song's opening riff, like on a tape recorder, like sort of like woozy out of it, and woke up the next morning. He had no idea he had written it. He had no idea what he had recorded in the middle of the night. And that, my friends, is how we got I Can't Get No Satisfaction. This, again, is according to Keith Richards in his memoir. Keep in mind, he did a lot of drugs in the 60s and 70s
Right.
thereafter. But apparently he did a drowsy rendition on a tape recorder in the middle of the night with the cling, I can't get no boom, do-do-do. He came up with that in the middle of the night.
And then there's 45 minutes of snoring.
That's what he claims. Yeah. He's like, and the tape, I didn't stop the tape recorder. And so I just recorded him saying the riff and then just him snoring.
People always say to keep a pad and pen next to your bed in case you have some ideas when you wake up. I'm not musical, so I've never thought about a tape recorder, but it kind of makes sense.
Well, these days it is the year 2025, Jill. So you could just use you could just use your phone.
No. I'm getting the Casio.
She needs to get she needs to get a tape cassette.
Because you're not supposed to sleep with your phone near you anymore, right? Isn't the thing that you're supposed to kind of keep your phone
it away from your both for your brain and for your ease of sleep
and detox,
yeah, all of that. All right, and we end here with we said goodbye to one classic show on this day 26 years ago, The Nanny. She was working in a bridal shop in Flushing, Queens.
She was there to sell makeup, but the father saw more. She had style, she had flair, she was there. That's how she became the nanny.
Well done. Good pause there. So there we go. We said goodbye to the nanny on this day in history, Jill, and I think that's where we'll end this podcast.
Mosh Wanunu, that we still have not come up with our
We still haven't come up with our own version of Jason Derulo. By the way, for those of you who are too young to remember the nanny, Gen Zers, I speak to you. It was a show that many millennials, Gen Xers, it was one of those iconic 90s shows, The Nanny with Fran Drescher.
All right. Thanks for the walk down memory lane. And thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and write us a kind review in the App Store. We'd appreciate it.
We love the reviews. We love your listenership. Spread the word. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.
That's how she became the nanny.
That's how we became Mo News.